Now, super. So welcome everybody. This is the tail end of our fourth year doing these building electrification webinars. And tonight we have a new and exciting topic. May sound far-fetched, but I think it could become very real in maybe a couple of years. So we have a candidate, a person who's going to be giving a talk about where the world is going with balcony solar or plug-in solar. His name is Dan Terpstra. He was talking to me about his career. It's been a career where he loves to tinker with technology and make good trouble. So I'm giving him the chance tonight to make trouble, but in a good way, I hope, tonight. Dan, you didn't send slides, but what we'd like is for you to send them in, and then I'll add your slides to our website. And then
he can share his slides, Steve. We already did that.
Okay, well, super. Thank you.
But I'm happy to share the slide deck after the presentation as well, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, that'll be great. Or you could do a PDF. That would work too. So we had a large number of people. I don't know, it's probably 40 people maybe tonight. That was my introduction, and we'll just charge ahead. Dan, why don't you go ahead and start sharing?
All right. Let me share my screen. Everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. I like to see who I'm talking to, so let me change my view here. Well, most of you've got your cameras off, so I'll just look at the little squares with your names in it. That'll work. Okay. Might as well jump right in and get started. My name, as Steve said, is Dan Terpstra, and I live in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. That name may sound familiar to some of you. Oak Ridge is in the eastern part of the state. It's near Knoxville, and I've been here for the last 40 years. I spend some of my time in Nashville as well because I've got 2 kids in Nashville with 3 grandkids, and that's kind of an attractant. So I'm splitting my time between those 2 places these days, and that has some impact on the solar balcony story as well. I'm a Sierra Club member. I'm a member of the Harvey Broom Group here in East Tennessee, and I'm also a member of Third Act. You've got a Third Act group in New Jersey, fairly recently formed, if I understand things right. I was a founding member of Third Act Faith, which is a nationwide chapter of Third Act, and I'm also a founding member of Third Act Tennessee. So that's kind of got me involved in things happening across the whole state. I paid my way through college by working for my dad as a residential electrician. So that's kind of given me some familiarity with solar panels and how to put them in around houses and how to fiddle with electrical panels and stuff like that. I got a degree in chemistry, but spent my career in computers. So like Steve says, I love to tinker, and I don't know, every now and again, I like to get in trouble too. So that's who I am, and let's dive into the topic. First question that usually comes to mind is, what is balcony solar anyway? And kind of as the name implies, it's solar panels that can be mounted on a balcony if you want. It's also called plug-in solar or portable solar. And the reason it's called portable is you can put the panels just about anywhere you want. Here it shows some panels on the ground, some panels on the balcony. And the big thing is that you can move them around. If you're in an apartment, like a lot of people who don't have access to any other kind of solar are, you can hang them on your balcony and then take them with you when you move to a new apartment. So they're not tied to a place, they're very portable. And it's plug-in because, as shown in this picture, you plug it into an outlet and you're done. There's no big installation, there's no solar contractor. It's pretty quick and easy to get started and get going. Where did all this stuff start? About a decade ago, 2017, 8 years ago, I guess, Germany was a big early innovator on rooftop solar. And there were a lot of people back in the early days, particularly with their nuclear plants. So it was a lot of DIY people in Germany who started playing with very small solar systems because 50% of their population lives in apartment buildings and they didn't have access to rooftop solar for themselves. So it was a market that was kind of primed for playing around with this sort of technology. And by 2019, there was enough of them doing this that they started developing some safety standards that were implemented as law throughout Germany. And it started to kind of gain some momentum. And then COVID hit in 2020, and a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands in their apartments, and a lot of folks started playing with installing their own balcony solar systems. So there was just this momentum that kept building over time. And then Russia invaded Ukraine. And when that happened, electricity prices, fuel prices in general, went sky high in Germany. And there was some real motivation for people to do what they could to reduce their energy bills, in part by putting up a couple solar panels and plugging them into an outlet and decreasing the cost of their bill by 10%, 20%, sometimes 25%. And it really took off. 2023, COVID's kind of over. They're still dealing with high prices of fuels. So people just really dove into this big time. 500,000 systems were registered in Germany in 2023 because they had the rules in place, they had the systems defined. You could go to the local IKEA and plunk down $1,000, well, 800 euros, and take home a system and hang it on your balcony. And 2 hours later, you've got solar added to your system. So it was really became pretty popular. A year later, there was more regulation that went on. 2024, they boosted the size of these systems from 600 watts, which isn't much, up to 800 watts, which still isn't much. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then they also went online with registering these systems, and they made it very, very simple and very quick to just fill out a one-page online form, maybe 4 questions, and then your system is registered with the local municipalities. They also worked a good bit at that point on tenant rights. So issues like HOAs that don't like to have solar panels and things like that, they basically made it a right for you as a tenant to be able to do this without interference from your landlord or your building owner or your HOA, those kinds of things. So they're way ahead of the curve as far as we're concerned. We're just taking baby steps at the very front edge of all of this stuff. By this year, they crossed the threshold of over 1 million systems registered, and they're generating enough power from these things. They're generating gigawatts of power from all of these virtual little 800-watt systems. And it's roughly the equivalent these days of around 4 or 5 nuclear plants. So you've got nuclear plants virtually hanging from everybody's balconies. So it's made a difference in a surprising way. Who else is doing this? The EU has pretty much jumped on board across the continent. These countries are ranked kind of in the order of how quickly they're starting to adopt this stuff. Spain has a lot of rooftop and a lot of utility grade solar. So they're a little bit late to the game, but all of these countries are getting started and starting to move forward with it. And that brings us to the US. What's happening here? I first heard about balcony solar back around, it was spring of this year. Somebody in Third Act, Tennessee said, "Hey, I read an article about this balcony solar stuff. Can we do that here?" And I really didn't know anything about it. So I did a little research and I said, "No, we probably can't do it here. We need safety codes and laws and a whole bunch of stuff that's not in place." But then I dug a little deeper and I discovered that there were a couple of companies. There was one company in particular at that point that was selling hardware that did balcony solar. And it looked to me like they did it in a way that we could actually do it here in the US. And then I discovered that there was legislation in Utah. A guy named Ray Ward, he's an MD, and he's a state representative in the Utah government, read about balcony solar, not too much different than I did, and said, why can't we have that here? And he wrote up some fairly straightforward legislation. His main motivator was we ought to be able to control our own power. And especially with small systems like this, we shouldn't be constrained by what the utility says we can do. There ought to be some kind of a category where we can do our own small solar systems without all the overhead of interconnect agreements and all the other stuff that goes along with it these days. So his whole goal was power to the people, was letting you take control of over your own energy destiny, at least in a small way. The amazing thing, in Utah, this legislation passed unanimously in both houses. So I'm still scratching my head about that one. I don't know how he did that, but it's pretty amazing. And basically what the legislation does is it creates a new category of solar power systems. It's called portable solar generation devices, and they're by definition very small. Here in the US, you remember I mentioned that in Germany, they can't be any bigger than 800 watts. In the US, according to his legislation in Utah, they cap the size of the systems at 1,200. Technically, you could probably go up to 2,000 on most US circuits in US homes, but just for safety's sake, they capped it at 1,200. So that's what's written into their legislation. And the effective date when this went into effect was in May, but the problem is they still don't have systems on the market that people are manufacturing and selling that comply with all the safety, with the minimal safety requirements that are in place for these things. That's about to change. It's about to change in a big way. And next year, we're going to see this stuff really take off. So that's where Utah is. It's the only place in the US where balcony solar is unambiguously legal. Everywhere else, it's not illegal, but it's also not clearly legal. So there's work to be done here. Here's the actual text of the legislation. It fits on a PowerPoint slide. It's not a lot of words. I'm not going to expect you to read them all because we're going to kind of dissect them and step through it a little bit. But the reason that it's in red and underlined is because I pulled this right off the page of the web where this legislation is written. And the stuff that's red and underlined is the new text that was added to the existing legislation in Utah on solar systems. So this creates a new category of small systems, and this is the maximum number of words that they needed to describe the constraints on those systems. I find that pretty amazing, especially for legislation. It's not that dense. So the categories of things in here that make a difference. The first one is a concept called islanding. And if you know anything about solar, basically, one of the problems back in the early days was if the grid went down and you had solar panels connected through an inverter to the grid, they were still pushing power back onto the grid. And that created a real safety hazard for anybody working on the grid. And there was a whole lot of implications to that caused safety concerns. So these systems, by definition, cannot push power back onto the grid if the grid goes down. They are set up with anti-islanding inverters. That's a mouthful. But that's all coded by an underwriter's lab regulation called 1741. That regulation has been in effect since 2018. And basically all systems with microinverters like are used on these balcony solar systems have that kind of an inverter, and they don't push power back to the grid when the power goes out. But what that means is they won't even power your house if the power goes out. So this is not a system for resilience. If the grid goes down, your solar balcony system goes down. You can't use it for anything else. But if you've got a battery with the system, you can plug things into the battery, and that, like your refrigerator or something like that. So you've got some capability of having local power if the grid goes down. So that's the first thing. There's another thing called backfeed. I called it back talk here, but either way, it's fine. And basically, that's when, if the grid is running and the system is producing more solar power than you need to use in your house, it will backfeed that extra power onto the grid. You've probably heard it referred to in terms of spinning your meter backwards or something like that. Most meters don't spin backwards. In fact, some meters spin the same way regardless of how the electricity is moving, but that's neither here nor there. In order to prevent these systems from sending power back to the grid when the grid is enabled, there's a little device, you can see it in the bottom of this picture, that little white box at the bottom. It's called a smart meter, and it measures how much current is flowing into your house, and it only allows the panels to produce that much power. So it prevents backfeed, or at least it's theoretically supposed to prevent backfeed. So that's not a part of the code, it's not part of the requirement, but most systems that are out there have some provision for doing this. And unfortunately, that increases the cost because it requires an electrician to come in and pull the cover off your panel and install this stuff. It's not a big deal. I did it myself in about 20 minutes, but it's still, if you've got to hire a professional to come in and do it, it increases the overall cost of your system. So my guess is next year, most systems won't require this, but as of right now, that's what's happening. One interesting thing about this is you don't need any permitting to make this stuff, to put this stuff in yourself. Your system is exempt from any interconnection requirements, and often that can be quite expensive and quite time intensive and take a long time to qualify for. And also, your utility cannot require you to have any kind of approval from them before you do the installation. You have, under this legislation, the Utah legislation, you can plug it in yourself, and you don't need their permission to do it. Another thing that comes along with that is no net metering. If you know anything about a lot of rooftop solar systems, this is a big issue in California. It's an issue elsewhere. You can sell your power back to the grid. If you've got one of these small portable systems, by legislation, you can't sell power back to the grid. There's no net metering. The utility's not on the hook for it, and you can't make any money off of it. But it's producing a small amount of power that you're presumably going to use yourself anyway, so it really doesn't matter. The other side of that coin, the converse, is that there's no payments that you have to make to your utility. In Nashville, for example, they would charge me $375 for an interconnect permit and then an additional $9 a month to put power back on the grid, unless and until they approve balcony solar systems. And that wipes out any kind of cost benefit that you're going to get out of a system like this. So no payments is a big deal. And then the final one, it's kind of a sweetener for the utility. They're not liable if anything goes wrong. You're putting this in yourself, and they're not going to accept any liability for it. That's a reasonable thing for them to expect. So what's happening in places besides Utah? Like I say, Utah is the only state that's got legislation in place, but there's a bunch of other places where things are happening. There are bills on the floor of legislatures in Vermont, in New Hampshire. You can read the list. There's 5 states there that are listed where there's legislation already introduced on the floor, sponsored, the whole works. I would have included New Jersey in that because there's a bill on the floor in the New Jersey Senate as well. That bill number is S4786, but it looks to me on reading it that it doesn't conform. All of these other bills conform to the Utah language. They basically used Utah as a template, and they pretty much down the line wrote it in such a way that it conforms to their laws, but it contains the same rules as Utah. New Jersey's bill doesn't. It's got some wacko stuff in it right now, and I've been told that it was basically introduced as a placeholder, just to get something there, got a number assigned to it, and it'll be revised before it actually gets actively discussed and moved forward. And Washington State is in a similar place. They're discussing it with legislators right now, but there's nothing on the floor. I'm hearing that there's another 16 to 20 states, maybe total, not in addition to these, but that are in some stage of generating legislation for this stuff too. So that's what's going on. And several other states, California is the biggest one, doesn't have any legislation underway right now, but they've actually got systems out there that are installed and running, and they're working with PG&E and some of the other utilities to see whether or not they can permit these systems even without changing the legislation. And Tennessee, it's a similar situation. I'm working with Nashville Electric and with Knoxville Utility Board and a few other places to try to move forward with it, even if we don't get statewide legislation in place. So there's a lot going on right now, and I've never been involved in anything that's been moving as fast as this. Just in the last 9 months, it's been transformative. So it's kind of amazing. Also nationally, there's an organization called BrightSaver. They're a nonprofit, brightsaver.org, and they've been working on this in the Berkeley area, coming up with a financing model for this so that basically people could buy these things with financing from them and pay for it out of the savings that they have every month. That works in California because the cost of electricity is very high. I don't know what your New Jersey electric rates are, but that'll determine what your payback period is. If you pay more for electricity, obviously you can pay for a system like this pretty quickly. Tennessee is TVA land, and TVA, for all of their faults, has done a great job on keeping electricity prices low. So that means that payback periods for these kinds of systems is pretty long. So BrightSaver just recently, within the last week or two, came out with a white paper. It's about 15 pages long. That link on this page references that PDF of that white paper. You can download it if you're interested. They conclude that if 5 states, and I don't know how they come up with 5 states, because states can be as big as Wyoming or as big as New York. If 5 states pass legislation in 2026 for balcony solar, that will be enough market size for vendors to enter the market and pull prices down pretty quickly by at least half in the next year on that order. And the interesting thing is that they predict that within 2 years, the prices will drop to 50 cents a watt. Now, I don't know if you're probably not nearly as wonky as me in following how much solar costs per watt. Here in Tennessee, if I were to put a rooftop system on, it would be about $3.50 a watt. When I got the panels for the balcony panels for my place in Nashville, I paid about $2.40 a watt. So it was cheaper. 50 cents a watt is dramatically less than that. And it's roughly the same price that balcony solar costs, or excuse me, rooftop solar costs in Australia. So Australia has very high rooftop penetration because it's very cheap. And much of that is the soft cost of all of these interconnect agreements and design agreements and permissions and permits and things like that. So if there's enough market in 5 states to be able to get the vendors to really produce this stuff, we're going to see the costs come down rather dramatically. And one way to get the costs down is to not have to worry about that backfeed stuff that I was talking about earlier. They also conclude that payback will drop across the country to about 4 years. So within 4 years, you'll save enough on electricity to pay for the cost of the system. That's pretty good amortization. That's pretty quick. And they say that by 2032, which is what, 7 years from now, the amortization time will drop to 3 years. So that makes it a pretty cost-effective appliance to purchase. And then they also conclude that by a decade from now, if all of this happens, if 5 states ratify this next year, there could be as many as 24 million households across the country in the US that are taking advantage of balcony solar to defray the cost of their electric bills by 10 to 20%, something on that order. And that's a bunch. That's 1 in 6 Americans. So it's pretty quick. Here's a couple of the vendors. I've got three more slides and then we're done. The vendor that I bought from is Craftstroom. They were the only game in town back last spring. And if you look at the middle panel here, that's the 1200 watt system, which is the maximum size that Utah allows. And the price, I got to put my glasses on. Price on that is $3,000. So it's pretty linear, 800 watts for 2,000, 1,600 watts for 4,000. But the sweet spot seems to be that 1,200 watt system for $3,000. Here's another vendor, EcoFlow. They've just recently come out with products that they are now selling, but only in Utah. That's the asterisk there. So you've got to be from Utah to buy from EcoFlow. This is configured differently. Every one of their systems has a battery, and the battery and the inverter for the solar panels is built into that box that you see on the Stream Ultra picture. The middle picture is 1,600 watts of panels and an inverter and a battery. And that price is about the same $3,000 that we saw from the Craftstroom 1,200 watt system. And then the third one, this is a vendor from China. And every time I've looked on their website, it says they're sold out. So I've been talking to the folks at BrightSaver. They say they've got some of these units in place and they like them, but we can't get them. And I'm not sure if that's tariffs or China issues or just that they're selling like hotcakes. I'm not sure what the deal is there. But you can kind of see these systems. Also, this one's about $4,000 and a little bit bigger with a bigger battery. So those are the vendors that are out there right now. Like I've said, the landscape here is changing incredibly quickly. And that's kind of where we are. And I'm done. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
If you could put your questions into the chat, then we would have them here. I'll just go through the ones that people have already asked, which have been answered. Let's see. Well, someone asked if the law that Dan referred to, which said no permission was required to use these, and they asked if that was only in Utah or anywhere else. And I answered, I think it's just Utah law is what he said.
Yeah, that's just Utah. Now, if you've got backfeed prevention and it's working the way it's supposed to, you could ask for forgiveness rather than permission, because it's likely that the utility will never see what you're doing. If it doesn't backfeed, they can't detect that it's there, but they'll make you yank it out if they find out about it.
Another question is who is sponsoring this New Jersey bill? And Nadine answered that it's Bob Smith and Senator Dignan, I guess. I don't know how you say that. And Jeff put in a link to the BrightSaver white paper.
What's Jeff doing here? Isn't he from the West Coast?
Yep, I snuck in. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I've been sneaking into these for a while now. They're great.
It really is not a problem. So thank you for joining us.
Oh yeah, we allow anybody. Jennifer says, does Utah legislation allow battery storage?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So no problem there. Joanne wants to know, are any of these panels flexible?
The Craftstroom panels are flexible. In fact, you see from a lot of the pictures that they look pretty lightweight. My opening slide had a picture of a woman basically hanging a pretty large panel on her balcony. the panels I've got are flexible, not real flexible, but they're fairly flexible, and they're only about 6 or 7 pounds per panel for 200 watts. So they're not the big heavy glass frames. They're kind of a flexible mylar panel. So yeah, they're pretty lightweight.
Ah, that's great. Howie says, does anyone make a single panel system?
Yeah, in fact, Brightsaber was installing single panel systems with the lightweight flexible panels, but they're only 200 watts. So that's great to play with. It's great fun to play with 200 watts, but it's not really going to do a whole lot to offset your energy bill. So you can get started with that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Manjula says, I'm not an engineer, so I hope this question is not too basic. Will a 1600-watt panel run a medium-sized refrigerator if the power goes down?
Yeah, absolutely. When I installed my system in Nashville, it came with a little phone app. And since I had to put those current transformers in my panel to be able to measure how much load I had, I could get to the point where even if I'm not there, I took a vacation to France this summer, and from France, I was monitoring my refrigerator turn on and off on the app. And it takes about 100 watts or less. So yes, with those panels. But keep in mind, if you don't have a battery, then you're just going to be able to run your refrigerator between about 10 and 3 during the middle of the afternoon when you're generating solar. If you've got a battery, then you can save up enough kilowatt hours to be able to power your refrigerator all day long and then recharge it the next day. So that'll work.
Sorry to butt in, but Dan, isn't it also correct that unless you have a battery and specific systems that'll allow you to plug in, you're not going to be able, if the power goes out, you're not going to be able to run your refrigerator?
That's absolutely correct. You need the battery in order to be able to supply load so that it'll know to keep generating. Otherwise, that first code that I said, the UL 1731 or whatever it is, will shut the panels down and you won't get any energy out of them at all. Good point. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay. The next question is, do these panels have to be hung or could they be placed in a sunny spot in a yard? I think you kind of showed that in your picture.
Yeah, you can do pretty much anything you want with them. Put them any place you've got sun. And most of these panels, at least the ones from Craftstrom, are bifacial too. So there's a front and a back, and they'll actually produce electricity from both sides. I think the
cool.
front is 200 watts and the back is 180 watts or 160 watts, something like that.
Jeff has another question. Please provide more information on what's involved in getting those approvals from UL. We were wondering about that too.
Yeah. The trick right now is getting system level approvals from UL. There's a lot of components out there. All of the inverters have UL certifications, and pretty much all of the individual components are UL certified. But there's a debate about whether or not the entire package needs a UL certification. And a lot of these things are still kind of on the edge as far as NEC certification is concerned. NEC is the National Electric Code, and that sort of controls how they get installed, not how they behave from a safety perspective. So the vendors really don't want to jump into the market with both feet until they've got assurances that they're going to get the UL approvals that they need to be able to put them on the shelf at Best Buy or Costco and have people walk in and pick them up and take them home. So, and those processes are slow. The UL agency and the NEC agencies are working through those systems right now, but it's a bureaucracy and it takes time.
Ed asks, what are the best sources to follow balcony solar progress?
Brightstrom's a good place to kind of monitor their website. They're keeping up with this stuff on a national basis, pretty much across the board. And you can just go to Google and Google balcony solar or plug-in solar, and there are articles coming out weekly, almost daily, on the topic. And it's hard to keep up.
The questions are coming in kind of fast and furious now. You've piqued everyone's interest. Has there been pushback in any state to require batteries?
No, they don't require, at least none of the legislation that I've read, and most of the legislation is available online if you want to dig into it. Nobody's requiring batteries, but I would suggest that if you really want to maximize effectiveness, you need a battery. Um, and as I pointed out with the EcoFlow systems, the batteries are built in. It's just part of the system. Zendor, same thing. Craftstrom, not so much. They've got a different design, and the batteries are independent of that. But what happens is that if you don't have the load, if you don't have things running in the middle of the day when you're generating solar, those electrons just sort of disappear, and nobody gets to take advantage of them. They don't go back to the grid. They don't. You don't get to use them anywhere. So batteries can as much as double the effectiveness of the solar energy that you capture, but they add cost. So that lengthens the amount of time it takes to pay off the system.
Joanne has a novel idea. She's thinking of using these panels for a new room and moving the panel from one side of the house to the other as the sun moves. Does this seem like it would work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That, there are solar tracking devices that are motors that optimize the amount of solar that falls on a panel. And she's just suggesting doing it by hand. And yeah, that'll work fine.
Ed asks, are you familiar with gizmo power?
I've heard Gizmo, I've heard the name. They're mostly doing, like they've done solar carports and things. And they're off grid. They're not connected to the grid in any way. So you really can't use them, to my understanding, and my understanding is not complete on this. You can't use them to offset your loads in your house. You could use them to charge your EV or to do things independent from the grid. But I don't think that they're designed to be to feed into the grid the same way that balcony solar is.
Is there a minimum number of hours of sunlight required to make these economical?
Boy, that's a tough one. For one thing, it's a question of what does economical mean. Right now, at even $2 or $3 a watt, my payback on the panels that I bought is going to be 15 years or more. Is that economical? Only for geeks that really enjoy playing with this stuff like I do. So, what's the trade-off there? I don't know. Even during the winter in Tennessee, there's enough light to generate power, but does it generate a lot? Not really. A kilowatt hour or 2 kilowatt hours a day. And in Tennessee, with 12 cents per kilowatt hour electricity, that you're only saving a quarter a day. It takes a long time to add up. So,
So
yeah,
you're saying
that's a tough call.
there's intrinsic value and maybe on the level of a hobby instead of a business.
Unless we can get to 50 cents a watt, then it's a game changer. That can make a
Yeah,
big.
that would be great. I guess for the system that has a battery, Joanne's asking how much energy does one of the batteries hold?
That very much depends on the batteries. Usually these batteries are designed for the systems. I think Craftstrom's batteries come in 1 kilowatt hour increments. And in order to qualify for the tax credits that are disappearing at the end of the year, you need at least 3 kilowatt hours. So you'd have to buy 3 of their battery packs in order to be able to qualify for the 30% tax credit. So you basically pay for 2 batteries and get 1 free, more or less. The battery on both the EcoFlow and the Zendor systems that I highlighted are built in. And I think the EcoFlow was 1.5 kilowatts, and the Zendor was right about at 3 kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours, not kilowatts. Got to get your units right.
Oh, this is proof of concept. Jana says we installed, actually our electrician installed, the EcoFlow battery with a solar panel. Haven't tried the solar panel yet, so it seems legal in New Jersey.
Well, you've got to be careful about that because EcoFlow for years has been making battery products and battery backup products. They've got a very extensive line of stuff along those in that category. They've got stuff you can use with RVs and a lot of other kinds of backup applications. And they'll tie into your system and you can use it as backup power. In fact, you can set them up so that they charge off the grid. And then when they're fully charged, if the power goes out, they'll kick in. And that's a completely different wiring system there than balcony solar would be because that's just plug in, not permitted. You got to be careful. I've also heard other people talking about battery balcony solar where they've got a couple of panels and a battery and they call that balcony solar, but it doesn't tie into the grid at all. See, language matters and you've got to be careful about how you use definitions here. So in my definition, balcony solar means you've got solar panels and an inverter and maybe or maybe not a battery, and it's plugged right into your local power inside your house.
Jeff has put several links in the chat. He has one for balcony solar on sale at IKEA in Germany. He has one for U.S. market for solar photovoltaic plug-in and play systems, and another supplier called Plug and Play Solar. So all of those are there. And Howie, I finally got to you in the chat. I know you've had your hand up for a while. When I put in my rooftop system, the public utility didn't want me to turn it on until they put on a meter that read what I put out and as a separate item what I was using. My solar paid off in less than 5 years. I now pay $6 most months. So this is for his rooftop system.
Is there net metering in New Jersey? Did I see a yes from Howie?
Howie, you can
Yes.
turn on your
Okay.
mic.
There is net metering in New Jersey, thankfully.
Yes.
Also, there is an SREC system, which at the current thing is paying the equivalent of about 18 cents a kilowatt hour. It was up higher than that before. So I'm disappointed.
Oh, yeah, lucky you. Tennessee, we don't have any of that.
My interest in this is to put in enough additional generation to run a heat pump, and or my son is in a situation where his house is somewhat shaded, so he could move these into positions where at least he wouldn't have to make a major install. And
If you've already got rooftop solar and an interconnection agreement and the meters and all that stuff in place, you can add this stuff very easily and not even have to think about it. You're already governed under the rules that are in play, so you could plug this stuff in without getting anybody's permission to do anything. And you don't need any legislation for that to happen because you're already paying for all the overhead with your rooftop system. So go for it, have a ball. But you won't be able to run your heat pumps on it, most likely, because heat pumps have motors in them that have a very high spike right at the beginning when they turn on. And usually solar and batteries and inverters won't be able to handle those spikes unless you modify the heat pump by putting in a startup capacitor to handle that really sharp, intense spike at the beginning. So tread carefully when you're thinking about doing heat pumps on that.
There's a pretty big blower, and the air conditioning comes on with a pretty healthy surge. And in the summer, most of the power is coming out of my solar panels.
Yeah, but it's those spikes that can get you, and they can really damage the equipment. So just make sure that you take that into account whenever you do anything. It can be done. You just got to do it carefully.
We're going to get to the second. Thank you very much, Dan. Obviously, everyone was really interested in what you had to say. But we have a few minutes left, and we're going to get to the second half of our program now, which is I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the federal IRA tax incentives, which are going away in just a few weeks, actually, most of them. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the IRA incentives, as well as the state utility programs that are coming online, and those will be here for a while. The federal IRA tax incentives, oh, let me put this on. Slideshow. Oops. Let's try this again. Okay. Can you see that now on full screen? Okay. For EVs, unfortunately, the federal incentives have expired already. For most of the other home building upgrades, we have till the end of this year. And for a couple of programs that are mainly commercial, but that affect our move to electrify everything, we have till June of next year. The commercial rooftop solar does include churches, so you might be looking into that, and you have a little more time on that, I believe. Also, there were rebates in the IRA bill. Grants were given to the states to design and administer the rebate programs. IRA rebates were not repealed. In most states, including New Jersey, funding was awarded by the federal government, but programs have been on hold till now amidst all the uncertainty, and they haven't been announced yet, at least not in New Jersey. They're expected to go forward shortly, and in New Jersey are expected to be income limited since the IRA tax incentives that have been in place were aimed at higher income people who pay a lot of tax. I created this chart of federal tax credits for a moderate income family from Rewiring America data. IRA tax credits have been available since 2023 and are well known and well used. Most of the tax credits are 30% of the cost with a cap. A few have additional constraints, such as for electric panel upgrade, there must also be an accompanying project such as a heat pump, energy efficiency, or solar. The solar, you'll see, is the only one that does not have a cap, but probably it's going to expire at the end of December. The EV incentives expired, but there is some speculation that car dealers took the incentives into account in pricing their cars, and they may offer discounts now to move their leftover inventory. In addition to the federal IRA incentive, we can add the new New Jersey Utility Energy Efficiency Program incentives that began early in 2025. They do vary slightly among the utilities, and that's why we use the term up to, depending on how each utility implemented the programs. So please link to the utility website to get more exact information, your utility. There are incentives for other appliances. I was just looking at heat pumps in this chart. These discounts are deducted from the price by the contractor. The building decarbonization programs were advertised to be available in July 2025. But to our knowledge, the only one, PSEG, is active yet, and only if you're a knowledgeable customer who asks for what you want and you're dealing with a knowledgeable contractor that knows what's available, because there is no information yet available on the website. We're told by different sources that the other 3 electric utilities are coming online with the building decarb discounts, possibly by the end of this year or maybe early next year. But that's just a rumor, so we don't know how true that's going to be. This chart is the up to amount approved by the BPU, and the chart came from the BPU actually, and may also vary by utility. The incentive amounts are based on the displacement and removal of fossil fuel equipment. So, a cold climate air source heat pump on the top line displaces a gas furnace that fully displaces a gas furnace gets the largest incentive. A non-cold climate that keeps the gas back up, and that's this one down here, gets the smallest. And the last line for ground source heat pump, the amount depends on its size and whether gas or delivered fuel such as oil or propane are displaced. There's also an extra amount there for moderate. In fact, for all of these, I think there's an extra amount for moderate income. Finally, this last chart lists many other electric appliances that can get incentives. These are part of the Building Decarb program. Some of them may be available now and listed in the utilities' websites. And one big advantage that may make it more worth your while to hurry up and do this, well, actually this will go on for a while because it's a state program. To buy now, that is that many of the utility programs offer 0% on-bill loan payments. If so, you can take a loan for the full purchase price to be paid on your utility bill for usually 7 or 10 years without any down payment. That's a deal that's hard to pass up. So where do we go from here? First, we would advise to make a plan for what you can do the rest of this year. Then eventually keep adding on to the plan. Our New Jersey Electrification Coaching Network of volunteer coaches can help you plan and electrify your own home. We currently have about 20 New Jersey coaches in our network and offer this free one-to-one consultation. Coaches are trained either by Rewiring America or are working professionals. We can meet with you virtually to discuss the needs, issues, and options, provide information, and suggest contractors. We also host webinars, just like this, or in-person talks. We have a database of our monthly building electrification webinars and a Substack with articles of interest. And here's how to get in touch with a coach. The first link, or the QR code, takes you to a form to sign up for coaching, which again is free. Other links are to our BE webinar database, our Substack of articles, and a link to Rewiring America, which has both an electrification planner tool and an incentive tracker that gives both federal and state incentives to the extent that they can be found online. And these, you can't do anything here with the slide sharing, but they will be in the slides that we send out in a day or two. Now I'm going to turn it over to Steve to talk about our most recent case study.
Thank you, Pat, and I really thank Dan for his great presentation. I have a case study that is on my own daughter's house. And right now, though, we have time of 9 o'clock, and I'm wondering if I should just zip through it, spend maybe 5 minutes at the most, and then continue maybe in the December meeting for the bulk of it.
Well, if you can do it quickly, then we'll have a little bit of time at the end. We'll go till
Go.
8:15 if you, I mean 9:15 now.
9:15, yes. It's getting late.
Because we started late.
Okay, why don't we proceed then? So next slide. So my daughter's house was built in the 1960s and had very little insulation, not constructed tightly, had poor windows. It's a one-floor ranch on concrete slab, and it has air ducts that are made of asbestos embedded in the concrete slab. The small original house was about 1,000 square feet in the core of the house, and there were 2 subsequent additions. So there was a rear playroom in back. There was the arrow around it, and then the house was remodeled with a front new master bedroom and bath. And each of those ended up having a heat pump that I had some part in providing during the time they were under construction, with heat pump actually added later in the back room. So I've been doing this sort of heat pump or electrification of houses for my whole family. Every time anybody in the family buys a new house, I immediately do something like insulate the attic. And I have a lot of experiences with that over 2 of my own houses, my son and now my daughter. Whenever they first bought the house, I went up in the attic and in my house just unrolled layers of 6-inch fiberglass as soon as I moved in. And when my son bought his house in North Carolina, he and I rented a Home Depot insulation blower. And it's surprisingly easy to do this. And we carted to his house maybe 30 bags of cellulose insulation and blew those into the attic. It's very quick and easy to do. I want you to go to the next slide. So our first heat pump was in about 2022 for that large master bedroom. And this is slide 3 of mine, right?
You want
I
to
think
know?
so.
Yeah, well, that's actually the seal. So I'll talk about that in a second. So the heat pump was actually a Fujitsu model. I was really pleased when the contractor building that addition called, and I overheard this conversation saying, "Hey, I had this tremendous cold climate Fujitsu 1.5 ton top-rated heat pump with great specs, and would you like to put it in?" And I was pleased that my son-in-law said yes. Now, the Fujitsu model is normally considered second only to Mitsubishi in quality and warranty. So next slide.
You're
And we
going to
signed.
talk about seal, right?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about seal now first, but we signed a contract with Seal for weatherization and sealing for the work shown here. This was really a New Jersey rebate program at that time called Home Performance with Energy Star. These are all the available components. They threw in a heat pump water heater. Now they even throw in a heat pump furnace as part of the HOMES program currently. So this shows work and prices for each of the components of that work. It's maybe a little bit higher now. There was at that time a $5,000 rebate, and it's in that same ballpark now for the HOMES program. And they also throw in a 0% 7-year or 10-year loan from PSEG, and I believe that the other utilities do the same. 0%. It's an offer you can't refuse. Next slide. Our next heat pump was a 1-ton Mitsubishi. 1 ton is 12,000 BTU per hour. And this was my first experience negotiating the size of a heat pump. It's important that the heat pump not be too big because the humidification will suffer in the summer. And it's important not to be too small because your house will get cold in the winter. And this shows a Mitsubishi mini split rear playroom heat pump that I had a contractor installed in late 2023 after the house was weatherized. And I used off-the-shelf software to calculate the heat loss. I knew what size I needed. It's interesting. I went to the person in the back room at Mitsubishi, Princeton Air, and I talked to him about what size was he going to recommend. And he put in what I considered an underperforming HVAC heat pump. And we talked about it, and it turned out he was using a 16-degree design point, and I was using a 10-degree design point called a balance point based on Department of Energy and Energy Star table. And so the result was a slightly larger cold climate heat pump. He said, sure, let's throw it in for the same price, they up to about a 1-ton heat pump. Next slide. So this brings us back to the original 1960s construction. It's about 1,000 square feet without those wings that were added afterwards. And I calculated the size of the heat pump using monthly gas bills. It was over 2 years of the house operating with those two heat pumps. And I determined exactly how many BTUs were required. And from various sources, I could get the degree hours required by the weather conditions for each hour of the winter. And it allowed me to calculate the size of the required heat pump in BTU per degree hour to replace the gas furnace. And so with that in hand, that data was very valuable. I got bids from 2 contractors, and they specified heat pumps that were higher capacity than needed. And they were totally ignorant of the PSEG decarbonization rebates that we knew were starting to roll out. So I asked another New Jersey electrification coach, who's also a highly rated HVAC-backed contractor, and he did a manual J calculation for me. It verified my calculations, and he supplied me a detailed page of requirements for installing and sealing new attic ducts, because we really wanted to replace those asbestos ducts that were in the concrete. And Mitsubishi pointed me to Arctic Air, which specializes in Mitsubishi. I encountered one problem with that vendor. The initial contract was supposed to be a cold climate 2-ton Mitsubishi. After getting the quote, I looked up that model in the quote and found it was not a cold climate heat pump. It would have caused the house to get cold in temperatures below 17 degrees. And so I immediately called the customer agent, who quickly rewrote the contract. He said he's sorry, he made a mistake in one character in the model number, and I got a new contract. If I had not caught this error, the wrong size heat pump might have been installed, which is a dangerous thing to think. Next slide. So I changed my modeling to the requirement that we have cold climate Energy Star 6.1 model, and that's exactly what my new graph showed. Would heat the center core of the house down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit with no supplementary heat, no gas, no heat strip when required, down to 5 degrees. So we went ahead with the cold climate version of this heat pump. Installation actually took 5 full days because 3 days were quite difficult in the attic, which was a fairly small attic, and it was difficult to get the well-insulated ducts all installed in that cramped attic. But at the end of 5 days, I'm a happy camper on this. My daughter is happy. Everything's installed and looks good. And so calculations show that this should work great. I think I'll be comfortable because I'm buffered by the other 2 cold climate heat pumps that are in there that are also pull their own weight. So we'll see. I'll be taking data, watching carefully, getting feedback, and I'll add this to part of my case study on this house. So thank you for staying with us over time. That's all I had to talk about. Unless you have questions, I can quickly answer. It's 9:09. We said maybe another 6 minutes if people have questions. Is there anything in chat? I
Yeah,
don't see.
I'm looking right now. Oh, Nadine says I'm getting 10,000 off a new heat pump. PSEG decarbonization credit. You had to ask for it, didn't you, Nadine?
How are you?
Make
Contractors
sure
coming to
you
my
get
home
all of the
tomorrow.
credits before she goes on. We got $10,000 off that new heat pump. We also got $2,000 off because we totally decarbonized by getting the furnace out of there. And we got $2,000.
For the reducting.
Oh, for the ducts that we
For the 3
reducted the
days
place.
of ducting. Yeah.
And in addition, in 2026, my daughter receives a $2,000 federal rebate.
Hmm.
So we're happy campers.
Yeah. And that was, I think he figured out 60 or 70% of the cost. They got back in incentives.
And Nadine is saying she's replacing her 19-year-old heat pump. Wow. It served you well. Be sure you get a cold climate heat pump and have the contractor do this calculation I talked about. It's really critical. If it, and the calculations will show, hopefully, that you don't need backup. You don't need the gas and you don't even need the heat strip.
Nadine, is your contractor Jim?
No, actually, that didn't work out for us.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Well, you can tell us later whether
Yeah.
you recommend the new person or not.
yeah, you can
The new
provide a case
contractor.
study for us. Thank you.
Okay.
That's the
Howie
last
has a
I see.
Howie has a
again.
question.
Oh, yes.
Would you recommend the this contractor, even though he missized the unit?
I'll tell you, I think he's probably one of the better contractors. I give him the benefit of the doubt that he probably writes quotes for non-cold climate all the time, I'm guessing, because they're cheaper. And so but you need backup heat for those, for sure. And I'm guessing it's unusual. I requested it. He just missed the character because he put in the standard numbers.
And it was just one character.
It's one character out of this, 10, 12 digit code. So would I trust him? Yeah, but I would
Check his work.
back it up. I would check it out. And the way you do that is get hold of an electrification coach who knows how to model the house and then make sure that it's proper.
Let's see. Paul says, Weil McLean is making a new air-to-water heat pump called the Eco. Whoops, it just disappeared.
It's up, I see it. The heat pump acts in concert with the home gas boiler, taking over during milder temperatures. It's well suited for retrofitting homes with hydronic baseboard heating. I believe I'm getting the first New Jersey install. Rockland Electric has agreed to provide a customized decarb rebate for this new system. Wow. So I think we're all interested. I'd like to see this. It's the very first hydronic
Yeah.
baseboard heat pumps that I'm aware of. We've had a problem trying to get heat pumps that do the job.
Yeah, a lot of people have those and don't want to keep their radiators. And up to now, there hasn't been a heat pump that would work for that.
Yeah, please share with us whatever you find out and how it works out, especially with Rockland Electric and what you agree to.
Okay, Jana says Jim Farrell All Seasons installed their heat pump, I guess, last year, and we were very happy with him.
One of the Ed Newlock would ask, what are the warranties on the equipment? For my Mitsubishi, it's 12 years on the equipment and 5 years on labor. It really depends, though, on the number of stars the vendor has for Mitsubishi. If you have a 3-star vendor, they get longer warranty compared to 2-star or 1-star. I used, I think, a 3-star and got the maximum 12 years.
Well, we hit 9:15 on the dot if
Okay.
we don't have any other questions.
Well, I thank you for staying with us in overtime. Our next webinar is third Thursday in December at 7 p.m. I'm striving for another exciting topic. And what I'd like to have is let us know if you have topics that you want covered. We're trying to plan our 2026 programs. Let us know what you'd like to hear. So that's it for the evening. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to turn off the recording.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Bye, everybody.